Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 3. Ghosts of Elysian. Illyria, yes. Cillian. Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with our writing staff in Canada, but for some reason, yet again, chimeric antibodies, energy beings, planet, disease, yeah. The Trek Yards people should pay attention, though, because this is an episode that I suggested they could do as a Star Trek movie. A space plate that threatens a ship. Named space plate. They've done a bunch of episodes like that, and the ones that were the commenters were like, no, that would be really tasteless. Why do a pandemic on the space on the ship? They freaked out. Some of them freaked out. Oh, too soon. Oh, no, it's not. Do a pandemic story. They're right afterward. It's like when comedians do stuff like that. So, a couple of months ago. Okay, I'll start over. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Ghosts of Illyria is about a planet of augment like people who are on a planet. They're more like Cillians because some of them become space aliens in the story. Spoilers. Fairly obvious. Well, what's going on? But a landing team goes down to the ship. They have this ion storm thing. The ion storm things, they included those in the original Star Trek and in one Next Generation episode, maybe two Next Generation episodes, in a movie, because they had to have storms on the high seas. The only reason they did that. And Star Trek was treated as a high seas show, like Horatio Hornblower. That's what they were thinking. Also, it's a Western. It's Wagon Train to the Stars. It's a Western. So it's Wagon Train, but it's that. So if it's Wagon Train, that makes Next Gen Gunsmoke. Deep Space Nine, Fort Apache. So that's what they said. But yeah, Voyager, Bonanza. Next Gen is probably more like Bonanza than Gunsmoke. But yeah, so we have Strange New Worlds, which is more like Voyager than Next Gen. So it's Next Gen Light. It's kind of like Enterprise a little bit. Kind of a spin-off of it. I'm thinking that all of the Abrams stories are a spin-off of Enterprise, and that Enterprise is a completely different timeline, but that kind of matches up in some places with this one. So yeah, the Abrams and Goldsman and Kurtzman timeline is a different timeline, so it's not exactly the original. And even the Picard show is in that other timeline. It's not really Next Generation. So yeah. So then we get to our the landing party is experiencing an ion storm in a colony that's a Elysian colony where it's empty. I keep saying Elysian because it's silly track. And the ion storm makes the sensitivity to light, makes them want to have light come at them. They don't know the biofilters didn't work when they beamed up. They didn't know that the biofilters on the transporters didn't detect this weird augment virus that doesn't directly infect the two augments on the ship, Khan and Una. So they know they know that that's already there. So the reveal that they're augments is not unusual, but they seem to play it in the story like everyone forgot. And yes, it's Star Trek Renegades meets Star Trek meets Cillian Space. But yeah, it's not. I didn't do Renegades, but I was part of the crowdfunding for that one. And the End of Gods and Men, the previous one, and they got a DVD somewhere of Gods and Men. I didn't get my DVD of the Renegades, though. I don't think. I think it was an online purchase. Yeah, so then the Renegades changed all the names around and the ships around because of the Axonar issue. They shouldn't have, though, because they were actual Star Trek actors in it. They should have just left them. Yeah, well, anyway, that's neither here nor there. Eventually, they used the what they describe as chimeric antibodies to fight off the sun virus that's on the ship. Chimeric antibodies. I don't think my version of the story, which would have been on the Farragut, would have been all that different. I don't think I would have been that silly. But in this one, chimeric antibodies. They literally reference my character Chimera from Trek Core in this episode as having chimeric antibodies. Okay, they've seen Starship Chimera. Cubicles have just watched it. And is taking notes. And the people that did season 2 of Picard, they also should have taken notes and said, okay, this is how the next gen people will act. Because this guy kind of knows what he's doing. Not sure why, but he knows what he's doing. The virus is affecting the crew. The doctor's hiding something in the medical buffer. It turns out to be his daughter, which is remarkably similar to that Scotty episode in Next Generation. The buffer lasts forever, and the daughter is sick or something, and has to be in the buffer. They showed her in the previews, so we knew she was going to pop up eventually. Which is kind of weird, like, okay. But it's also similar to Transtech, and that Strabag has the DNA and stasis of his ex-wife, his wife who was killed in the Transform battle. They've seen Transtech, and they took notes. So, so yeah. But it's this. So this whole story is the chief engineer guy wants to mess with the medical transporter thing, but isn't allowed to because he wants to get through to the light on the other side. He beams up a chunk from the planet or something and tries to like blow it up, which doesn't make any sense. Then Khan goes crazy down in engineering and tries to blow up the warp core, but the warp core is going to breach for like 5 minutes. So apparently, it's not that much of a threat. And he goes down there and fights with her, and they discover they're both augments. And then we cut to, oh, by the way, everything's okay. Pike and Spock were waited out the storm. These energy creatures saved them. It's revealed that they were the colonists that turned into energy, which is cute. Like they're Cillians, of course. They're Cillians, of course they can do that. Proto-Q Cillians. That begs the question, like, why didn't they then stop the storm from happening? Storm's over. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe it was too big for them. I mean, ion storm passing the planet, constantly ion storms. Yeah, that never quite made sense in the original Star Trek, nor does it quite make sense in Next Generation. How would they have... You would think that something that strong that could float over a planet like clouds, like actual clouds in an atmosphere, even though they wouldn't look like that, wouldn't behave like it was in clouds in an atmosphere. And not only that, if it was that powerful, it would strip the atmosphere off the planet, and everything would be dead. It would strip the atmosphere off the planet, everybody'd be dead. If ion storms were a thing. Now, there are energy storms, I guess, in space, radiation or whatever, but it would be... But the original Star Trek was definitely thinking port of call type of thing, seafaring ocean vessel encountering storms. Like, literally, storms in an atmosphere on the planet. And Star Wars had the same problem. They have these dogfights in space that are clearly in an atmosphere. We're going to have storms in space that are in an atmosphere. We can have these alien ships exploding, and Battlestar Galactica did the same thing, all around the 80s, 60s to the 80s. Outer space to them is like not outer space, it's in an atmosphere on a planet with pressure and variance and everything, and moisture and all that stuff, and air, and behaving differently. There was a silly episode of Galactica where the shuttle bay was on fire. And nobody thought to just open the shuttle bay to space and let it put out the fire instantly. Because there's no air. But, oh no, the Galactica is burning in space. In Star Wars, in the newer ones, even the newer ones, there was a bomber. They had this bomber squadron that had no guns on the front, but guns in the back and on the sides, and it dropped bombs like it's in an atmosphere onto a ship. They're not magnetic, they're not torpedoes, they're bombs. At which point, the Sacred Cow Shipyards was like, that doesn't work. The guy, it was a Navy guy, Sacred Cow Shipyards, and he's like, that wouldn't work. Why can't they be missiles or torpedoes? Because that kind of would. They got a magazine of torpedoes, like magnetic bombs, because they're not in an atmosphere, they're hovering over a ship. Well, this one has some of that goofiness too. Because a magnetic, yeah, they're treating space like it's in an atmosphere. And yeah, and the way they show it, it would be visually destructive. Also, of course, they can cure a space plague they're not introduced within 50 minutes. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a plot hole in that. How did she turn the warp core off? They should have shown that. Like, reach up and turn the warp core. And have the computer say, warp core breach canceled or whatever. They kind of implied she was about to do that, but then they cut the commercial. And it's just over. And then they're on the planet. So they rescue Pike from the planet. Yeah. And they're really obvious floaty beings, I think, because they read Cillian books. What's funny is I was not in Canada in the writer's room when they thought of this. At all. It's just they thought of something very similar to that. And I don't mind, because it's funny. The chimeric antibodies. Yes. Yeah, they referenced the character. Oh, yeah, so... No, indirectly. There were other people that, yeah. We weren't in the writer's room. Don't blame us for that. Yeah.